So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. That is to say, good afternoon if you are joining us from cool, cold, wintry Montreal, almost snowy Montreal, and a beautiful good evening to all of you who are joining us from Israel as two members of this very important, very distinguished panel tonight do. It is my pleasure and privilege to introduce and to bring this event to its start, that is going to allow us to have a conversation following the film that all of you were able to watch and see yesterday about the important, difficult, but also uplifting story of the Aliyah and the integration, the difficulties that Israel's Ethiopian Jewish community have gone through over the past several decades. My name is Csaba Nikolenyi. I'm professor of political science at Concordia University in Montreal. It's been also my privilege and honor to be director of the Azrieli Institute of Israel Studies. The Institute is celebrating a very important landmark this year as we are marking our first decade in operation, in existence, promoting an important, informed, scholarly discussion about Israeli culture, history, politics, and so much more. As part of this celebratory year, it's just so wonderful to bring old friends and new friends back to the Zoom screen, joining us in this important conversation. And why I'm saying that Levi, Anbessa, and Yaffa, the three members of the panel, are old and new friends, you are going to find out in a moment. So without further ado, let me say a few words about our three distinguished panelists, and then I would say a few words about the rules of procedure, and then we will be able to start enjoying this intellectual treat. Now, Levi Zini is the filmmaker, the maker of the film that we all were able to enjoy and that we watched yesterday. Levi, of course, is by now an old friend and colleague. Those of you who were with us last year may remember the documentary about Menachem Begin that we watched together and had a conversation about the movie with Levi. So you may remember who Levi Zini is. Levi is a pioneer documentary filmmaker in Israel who has over 40 years of experience creating independent films and television documentaries in a variety of genres, including art films, docu-activism, and current affair exposés. Between 2009 and 2013, Levi served as Chief Commissioner of Israel's premier documentary channel, Channel 8. He's a recipient of a variety of awards from both local and international festivals, including Israel's Ministry of Education Award for Documentary Filmmaking in 1999 and 2012. From 2015 until 2019, Levi was a board member of the Israeli Documentary Forum. And importantly, Levi is the founder and art director of the film production company Films, which I understand is also responsible for making and for bringing the movie Yerusalem to our screens. Dr. Anbessa Teferra immigrated to Israel in 1990 from Ethiopia. Anbessa received his first academic degrees from Addis Ababa University in 1984 and 1987. And then after his Aliyah in 1993, he earned his graduate degree at Tel Aviv University. And then in 2000, he received his PhD from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Anbessa is a specialist in teaching courses, not only, but importantly, about his heritage. He teaches Amharic for beginners, advanced Amharic. He also teaches about courses, special topics courses in the morphology and syntax of Ethiopian languages. It's just wonderful to have Anbessa here with us, who also is participating in Tel Aviv University's new graduate program specifically dedicated to the preservation and the promotion of the culture of the community. And now another old friend, if I may say so, Yaffa Tegegne, who is and let me read it from her website, is a biracial Ethiopian Ashkenazi Jew born in Montreal. Yaffa's father, the late Baruch Tegegne, is known globally as a community leader and activist, credited with initiating the Aliyah of Ethiopian Jewry to Israel. Yaffa's roots, heritage, and education support her passion for public service. Since her father's passing in 2010, Yaffa has committed herself to carry on his legacy and advocates on behalf of the Ethiopian Jewish community. She serves as a consultant and speaker on Ethiopian Jewish history, culture, community, and Jewish diversity. Yaffa represents the Canadian Jewish community for provincial, national, and international organizations, as well as at various levels of government. And friends, I do want to mention, it may not have been obvious, that Yaffa is an old friend since she had the misfortune of being part of the very first course that I taught at Concordia University. I'm embarrassed to say how many years ago. But those of you who watched the film, here is another image of Yaffa, which I would like to actually use to start the conversation. So I'm going to leave this shot on the screen for a moment, and then I'm going to close the screen. I wish we were in the studio so I could actually get the live reaction from Levi, from Anbessa, and from you, Yaffa. And Levi, I see you're smiling already. So Yaffa, tell us about this picture, and I'm going to challenge the filmmaker to tell us about this. So Yaffa, what is this picture?
Well, that picture is of me. I think I'm under a year old, sitting on my father's lap, being interviewed by Simcha Jacobovici in Montreal, Canada. My parents moved from Israel to Canada in 1979, 1980. And Simcha, who is a very famous filmmaker in Israel now, he does documentary films about all kinds of subjects, actually began his first film with my father there, making a movie to show to Canadian and North American Jewry to raise awareness about the situation of Ethiopian Jews. It was, I think, one of the first films ever made. It was sponsored by the LL.B. And he is interviewing my father so that they could go and show the movie to communities in North America to raise awareness and money to push forward the issue of the Aliyah.
It's amazing. I didn't ask for your permission to use the shot, but when you told me that you were actually in the film, I had to do that. Levi, yeah, please. Go ahead, Yaffa.
I was just going to add also in the flyer of the event today is my grandfather. And I didn't know that until you sent it to me. And I saw my grandfather staring back at me in that flyer, which was also kind of remarkable. So I was really happy to have this connection to this film in so many ways. But anyways, I digress.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much. Levi, did you know that you would be meeting tonight, Yaffa, an older Yaffa compared to the baby Yaffa that we saw in the film? Did you know?
I must say, it's a kind of an archive picture because I got it from Simcha Jakobovich film. Simcha Jakobovich, I assume it was 81 or 82, went to Ethiopia with the help of Baruch Tegegne, and he wanted to prove to the Israeli Mossad and to the Israeli people that there is a way to go into Ethiopia. And from there, he went to Sudan. And again, he wanted to show the Israelis that there is a way to go into Sudan. By the way, when he arrived back from his shooting to Israel, and one of the head of the Mossad, it wasn't the head of the Mossad at that time, he was part of the one in charge, Ephraim Halevi. Later, he was the head of the Mossad, arrested him in the airport, and they took the film that they shoot in Ethiopia and in Sudan. And just after legal struggling or legal in the court, they got the film back. So this picture was part in the Simcha Yakubovich film. Then he told about Baruch Tegegne and his work. If I go for other side of this story is in Israel, when the Ethiopian Jew, or let's say B.C.L, arrived to Israel, it was they got a hug. I mean, it was pleasure, but we believed in Israel that it's our brave soldiers from the Mossad and from the Air Force and so on, brought from Africa and a black Jew to Israel, and they never gave a credit to all the other. First of all, to the Ethiopian, to B.C.L itself. I mean, it was their struggle to come here, and they, in a way, they forced themselves to arrive to Yerusalem, as they call the Holy Land. And there is another part that in Israel didn't give any attention to it, is a part of the Jews around the world to this Ethiopian exodus, which is in a way, it's a biblical proportion. And I wanted in my film to give that perspective, that there was a lot of Jews from America, from Canada, from Europe, that make the effort together. So B.C.L will come to the Holy Land. In a way, it was a narrative that the Israeli people didn't know. And till now, they not really know it.
Thank you, Levi.
See the film, will understand that is the way it is.
And that is certainly one of the many important messages that I personally got out of the film. Precisely the incredible range of actors that had to be involved, private and public, to make it happen. So what you just said certainly resonated with my understanding of the film. Anbessa, I see that you are here with us. So if you can hear me, let me ask you to please join in the panel conversation and tell us your first reactions to the film, how it contributes, complements your own understanding, of course, of your own personal history, but also the history of the Ethiopian community that you're so aware of, and that you represent, you teach about, and you nurture. So what are your first reactions to the film?
Yeah, before that, I want to be excused. I am now making connection from my mobile phone because my audio was not functioning on my PC. So that's a technical problem.
We're delighted to have you in whatever form we can. That's great.
Yeah. So I really, by the way, this was not my first time to see this film. By the way, I probably viewed it 2 or 3 times. Even part of it, I use it for my class. I have, in addition to language courses, I teach also a course on Ethiopian history, politics, culture, and things like that. And there are around 3 or 4 periods that I teach about history of Ethiopian Jews. Yeah. So I use this film, although not the whole film, but let's say part of it, and also other clips which I found on YouTube. And I even also personally met, for example, Danny Limor, who is one of really the the commanders of one of the operations from Sudan. You know, I met him twice. He came to Tel Aviv University and he gave a lecture. And I really, being also an Ethiopian, who passed many hardships, I really understand, how the journey of Ethiopian Jews was very difficult. It's unlike many other groups, who came by plane, and do not have to walk 1,000 kilometers from Ethiopia to Sudan. And really, as Zini has already said, the problem is many Israelis, or mostly people who were involved in this operation, or their families know about this, how this is a part of the story. Most of the Israelis even do not know the daring operation of the Mossad, and how the Israeli soldiers were ready to pay with their life, not only in Operation Moses, even also Operation Solomon in 1990. In that operation, my wife and my children came during that operation. So I'm personally also connected with this operation. So really, I learned a lot, when I view this film, I again learn new things which I'm not aware of. So it's really has an important place, this film, I think it should be also accessible. I'll try also, as in my position as a lecturer at the university, I'll try to make it, accessible to my students and also to their friends, etc.
Thank you, Anbessa. Thank you. And on that note, let me connect what you just said to next question, which I specifically would like to put to Yaffa. Yaffa, you're involved with, and you play a very important role in representing and creating awareness about the Ethiopian community in Israel, in Canada. What role can this film play in your particular work or in that particular enterprise? How does this film speak to Canadians, Canadian Jews, but not just, who are interested in learning more and understanding better the history and the circumstances of the community? And in that answer to that question, if you could just share with us your reactions and your response to the film, that would be very welcome.
Sure. So to answer the first part of your question, this is just like a really kind of a blessing that landed on my lap this week almost, because for the last few years, I've been trying to work with different Jewish community organizations who I think have become more aware of this story and there's been an interest in the last, especially I'd say 10 years, and especially since SIGD became an official holiday in Israel. So there's a lot more local Jewish communities that are interested in diversity and interested in this story, but we've had a lack of curriculum and a lack of programming available. So all of a sudden, like, people were asking, but we didn't really have the resources. A lot of the resources are also in Hebrew, which I had seen parts of this film in Hebrew before, because I believe it was aired on Israeli television in 5 segments, but the subtitles were in Hebrew. So having this available in English is really great. For the first time for SIGD, which is a uniquely Ethiopian Jewish holiday that just passed in November, I was able to have a speaker come to various high schools in Montreal and elementary schools and Hillel. So we did, for the whole week, we did a variety of educational events with speakers about Ethiopian Jewish history, culture, and questions about lives today, both here in Canada and Israel. So hopefully for next year, I'll be able to have better access to this film and we can spread it more widely, because I do believe that there's a really increased interest in this subject and just incorporating it into Jewish history curriculum, because just like the other panelists said, I was surprised at the lack of knowledge. And I think some of the educators were even surprised at the lack of knowledge and awareness of this amazing story, which should just be part of Jewish history. So we're working on it. So I'm really happy about that. And then in terms of my reactions, I mean, it's just, it's emotional on so many levels. There's so many people that I know and recognize in this film that were friends of my father, friends of my parents here in Canada. It's just, these cast of characters were the background story of my life. And it's amazing that I'm privileged to be so close to this really epic story. And I really felt like Levi said, this was the first time that I've ever seen a holistic interpretation or account, a holistic account from the Ethiopians, from the perspective of Ethiopians, from the perspective of Israelis, because again, the narrative at the beginning was, well, the Israelis came and kind of saved everybody. But yet I knew that my father, and I knew from my father's history, that that was not the account, that in the beginning there was a lot of difficulties and they had to protest and they had to lobby government and they had to do some pretty drastic things to get the attention of the Israeli government. It was not given. This is especially in the early 70s. My father came to Israel as one of the first 20 Ethiopian Jews in 1956. And there in Kfar Batia, you see those pictures in the beginning of that first group that Yona Bogale brought these kids. So my dad was one of that first group, and a lot of kids from that group did become leaders because they were in Israel, they'd been educated in Israel, and they became activists. And they said, well, you know, what do we do with this education that we have now, with this leadership we've been given? And a lot of them fought for their own community. And it was a very deep struggle, and lots of people sacrificed lives, money, time, you know, so it was really, really nice to see that kind of that being honored, that part of the story being honored in this way. And I think that that Israelis can really, I hope, appreciate the sacrifices that were made by so many on both sides, and see it in a new perspective, and see Ethiopians in a new perspective.
Thank you, Yaffa. That was very eloquently put. Thank you very much. Levi, I would like to ask you, point blank, why you made this film? Why now? Last year we talked about Menachem Begin, and then here we are talking about the history of the Ethiopian Aliyah.
Jerusalem, yeah. First of all, it's my profession, making documentary films. Secondly, even in a lot of my films are dealing with immigrant and son of immigration. I mean, I am a son of immigrants. My father was immigrant to Israel from Morocco, and I really, it's fascinated by it. And you know, Israel is an immigrant country, and it's a very special one because the state is immigrant country as well. Canada is immigrant country. Australia is immigrant country. But in those most countries, there are what unite the people is a future dream, the American dream. In Israel, while we are dreaming about the future, we are digging deep to the past, trying to find our history, our tradition, and to connect them together, which is making a lot of difficulties. And I think part of the problem with the Israelis, the identity, is this tense between past and the future. So it's fascinating me. I did few films about immigrants and the generations that was born in Israel, and that's part of what I found interesting is the story of Meta Israel. And there is another part. The Ethiopian people, the Ethiopian Jews in Israel, suffering from racism. And I thought that to fight those racism is by knowing the other one. Let's know them. Let's understand. Let's in a way admire them, because I think we should admire them. They succeeded more than 2,000 years to keep the uniqueness in a very difficult circumstances. I mean, they managed to find way to keep their uniqueness in a country that Ethiopian Christianity, which is quite similar to Judaism, and they did as they kept their Judaism. They kept the dream about that here is for Zion, which is amazing. I mean, just lately we celebrate Sigd, the Ethiopian.
That's right.
So we can say about the Sigd all the religious things, but in a way it was a social event, because all the people from all around the villages arrived and gathered together on the mountain, and it was a kind of a meeting between everybody. And let's remember that in Ethiopia, another part of what kept them is that you can't get married unless you have no religious 7 generations backwards. 7 generations. So you can't marry in your village. You have to find your bride or your
groom, yeah,
or groom somewhere else. So it was a kind of a place that you find your future with your beloved one. Anyway, so all those small things, and that the society, the Beta Israel society, tried to manage to arrange for themselves, kept them as a unique tribe in a very, Ethiopia is a very large and big and place, and we should remember it's the only African country that wasn't occupied by colonialism. I mean, they had Italy conquered them for 4 years, and they threw them away, the Mussolini troops. So it was the only African country that kept independence all over the years, which amazing. It's amazing by itself.
Thank you, Levi.
So that's why what I wanted to find in this film.
Yeah. Let me just make a quick note to our audience. Please start leaving your comments, questions in the chat box. I will try to get to as many of them as we can after getting a few more reactions and answers to some questions from our panelists. But I do promise that in a few more minutes we will open the chat box and we'll answer your questions and comments there too. Levi, you mentioned something that obviously is of tremendous importance in talking about the plight and the ongoing challenges facing the Beta Israel community. You mentioned racism, and this, of course, comes up at the very end of the movie as well. In fact, the concluding slides or images show us the moments from the difficult confrontations that have taken place in the streets of Israel over the past several years. So on the one hand, we do see these great difficulties. On the other hand, and here I'm going to turn back to Anbessa and Yaffa, who are, of course, educators. And Anbessa, in particular, you're part of the brand new graduate program at Tel Aviv University that is dedicated to nurturing the cultural heritage and to this serious scientific study, scholarly study of the rich cultural heritage of Ethiopian Jewry. So that's great. That's a great positive. So how are we to make sense of the presence of Beta Israel in Israel today? There are difficulties, there are positive movements forward. Give us a little bit of a flavor, your understanding of where things are moving. And in that context, if you could say a little bit more about the particular program and the particular leadership that Tel Aviv University is carving out in this, that would be very welcome. And then we'll throw it to Yaffa.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, we have initiated a special program a year ago, an MA program. It's known as Orit Guardians in English, and in Hebrew it is Tofse Orit, it's known as. So the aim is, every week or 2 weeks, one of the Kesim, I mean the spiritual leaders, passes away. Now, what we are left is probably not more than 8, maximum 10 religious leaders who were educated in Ethiopia. So if one passes away, it's like losing an encyclopedia, a lot of knowledge. So that the main aim of the program is enabling, these youngsters who register for the program to research, the manuscripts which are present within the Ethiopian Jewish community, and especially how the Orit, the Torah is transmitted orally. The Kesim, they speak in Ge'ez, but one of them also translates to the audience in Amharic, because Ge'ez or classical Ethiopic is understood only by very few people, religious leaders especially. So this is the main aim of the program. Last year we received 5 students. This year 5 were registered, but 2 didn't continue. But we'll try to expand every year to reach. And one of the other things which really, strikes me is now there is also a new generation of youngsters, who arrived to Israel as kids. And now they are becoming Kesim, they are becoming spiritual leaders. They are learning Amharic, learning Ge'ez, and becoming, ordained as a case, as a spiritual leader in Ethiopia. Because if such a program is not started, the tradition cannot be continued. It will be a great loss for the community. This is one of the aspects. The other thing is regarding racism and other aspects. I know the Ethiopian community, the B.C.L community, it suffered a lot, yeah. But slowly, the younger generation is becoming vocal. It was not timid like their fathers or grandfathers, because that was a part of an Ethiopian culture, to keep silent, etc. But now the youngsters are, they are very demanding, and they fight for their rights. So now, slowly, the Israeli also mainstream is also changing and accepting, and slowly also the youngsters are being integrated into the Israeli mainstream, let's say in the civil service, in the army, in other places. I know it's a lot. The government is also allocating a percentage, a certain percent, for job allocation in various positions. But I know it is a long struggle. It takes time. It can't happen. Ethiopian Jews are in Israel, let's say, not more than for 4 decades. So I think from time to time it can improve. But we must also exert our pressure. And probably one final point I can also discuss with Levi later on. This film was screened in Hebrew, and now it is subtitled in English. I think it is the time has come also, probably also to subtitle it also in Amharic, in the language which the community understands. So I'll, after this discussion, I may talk to Levi and, to see the possibility. I myself also, I do a lot of translation from Hebrew into Amharic, so I can also cooperate in this respect so that it can be accessible, especially for the elders. I know the youngsters can understand the Hebrew film without a problem. But the elders who are passing away, you know, they must also know their history. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anbessa. There are questions rolling in to you, so we're going to take them up in a moment. Let me just ask one final quick question, asking Yaffa for a comment about the situation, and I would like to bring the conversation more specifically to Montreal. Yaffa, what can you tell us about the Ethiopian Jewish community in Montreal? There's a particular question coming in the chat asking about to what extent the Ethiopian Jewish communities are merging into finding their way in the established Ashkenazi or Sephardic community synagogues, or do they have their own traditional prayer, religious and communal services, institutions, and so forth? So please bring it a little bit more alive for us as far as you can in terms of what the Ethiopian Jewish life looks like in Montreal.
Sure. So basically what happened is that before Operation Moses, my father was in Montreal, and people like Erwin Kotler started the Canadian Association for Ethiopian Jews, and they started families in the Montreal Jewish community started sponsoring other families to come out of Sudan or Ethiopia wherever they could. They brought, some children came without parents. So handfuls of families started coming in under Canadian immigration that never went to Israel. So they never had the experience of the Aliyah to Israel. They just were getting people out, mostly their families, as quickly as they could to save lives. So that being said, I think that when they came, and there was a few different waves throughout the 80s and early 90s. We're not a huge community, a few hundred people in Montreal. We're about 100 now. And I'd say before there was probably closer to 400. And a lot of people have left Montreal. A lot of people have gone to Israel or Ottawa or other places. So the community has diminished in Montreal. And I'd say that the experience of Montreal is probably different than the rest of Canada or North America. In Montreal, we were family. We had each other. Everybody came through Montreal, so we were able to kind of stick together, and we had each other to lean on in the hard times where you were very different from the rest of your peers in school. There was a lot of kids coming from all over the world. There was immigration from Argentina and Russia at the time. There's in Israel, a lot of kids that were coming to Jewish day schools from different countries. But it was very obvious that, you were the only, the isolated Black kid in your school. Again, we weren't isolated because we had each other in Montreal. And I think that helped. And we also kind of had a very diverse community in Montreal. But I know a lot of people had very different experiences in Toronto where they had a very isolated Ethiopian Jewish family in a random Ashkenazi community somewhere in Canada and had a very different experience. But here we've been very lucky to have each other as this kind of extended family. We come together. We've always had, we used to do a lot of Passover Seders together as a community. We would always have, most people went to one synagogue, and then people came from Israel went to a second synagogue, but it is an Ashkenazi synagogue that we go to. Actually a very religious Chabad Ashkenazi synagogue. And it was more of it happened to be the synagogue in our neighborhood. And it's a funny dynamic when you go in there, but everybody kind of, respects each other, and we've been together long enough. And at that shul, every May, they have a very big event to commemorate Operation Solomon. So, you become just like any community. You make friends in your community. People start to know you. It takes time, but we've established ourselves within the Jewish community in Canada, I think. And again, over the last 10 years, there's been this kind of reflection of, oh, wow, maybe we could show this culture and show off this culture and educate people within the community and be proud that we have this unique element of our Jewish community in Canada that they don't really have anywhere else except for Israel.
Thank you. Thank you, Yaffa. Final question from me to bring this conversation to a very daily, concrete reality, if you will. The fate of the remaining Ethiopian Jews, those who are remaining in Ethiopia, is making headlines in Israel and is creating some interesting tensions within the current already fragile coalition government. Would any of the panelists, Levi, Anbessa, or Yaffa, I'm not asking you to comment on Israeli politics, but could you comment on the present and possibly speculate about the future of the Jewish community that remains in Ethiopia? And in general, whatever you can tell us from your vantage points, from your angles, about the connections, real and concrete, to the extent that you know, that may exist between those who are in Israel, those who are in the diaspora, and those Ethiopian Jews who are still in Ethiopia. So sort of,
I would like to say something about the Falashmura. First of all, let's understand what it means, Falashmura. Those people that left Judaism through the years and they convert to Christianity. And when they started, mostly in the 90s, when the Operation Solomon was started, a lot of them arrived to Addis Ababa near the Israeli embassy, trying to get Aliyah, to get to Israel. But there, the order or the Israeli intention was just bring Jews to Israel, and there was a book of what they call the Book of the Jew, something that was in 1976, as a Gershon Halevi from the Sochnut moved all over Ethiopia, and he count and write down all the Jewish families that was there in this time. He count 28,000 Jews. So everyone was written in this book was on the plane. What the people that was left was Falashmua, that most of them was Christian, and they didn't come to Israel. Afterwards, there was something that I personally don't like. There was some rabbis, one of them very known as Waldman, Arav Waldman. They went to Ethiopia and they started a kind of convert. I think that's the English word for Giyur, to convert those people to Judaism. But it was an Orthodox Judaism. I mean, it wasn't what the B.C.L. kept there. As I see it, the problem with the Falashmura now, it's humanity. I mean, if it's separated families, let's bring them together. But I don't think we have to take every person, every Jew, every person that in Ethiopia, and open the gates to Israel for him, even if he spent 15 years in those places of Rav Waldman. It's a humanity. It's not about Judaism. It's not about making Aliyah. It's not about bringing all the Jews together to the Holy Land and so on. It's, in my point of view, it's humanity. Just unite families. That's my opinion. By the way, the Beta Israelim themselves don't really want the Falashmura to come. And when there is a Falashmura in Israel, most of the time, Beta Israel will never marry a Falashmura. I mean, they are not connected. They don't. In a way, they are looking, hey, when it was easy, you jump to Christianity. Now, when it's easy to come to Israel, so you are want to be. I mean, they don't like it. But again, there is a humanity question. When there is separated families, we should help them to unite. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Levi. Thank you, Levi. Any
Some,
comments by
yeah,
Anbessa? Yeah.
yeah. I want also to add something to that Levi has said. Yeah, from the point of humanity, I think there are families who are separated. For example, the father and mother is in Israel, and let's say two brothers in Israel, but one left in Ethiopia, or his sister. You know, what's irritating is, you know, if they give permission for Aliyah, you know, I know they don't come through Aliyah, they come under a different rule, you know. So they should bring all the family and not leaving there, let's say, a father or a mother, one of the family members. You know, what's the problem? The person who remains there, he'll be married. He's a human being, you know, he's a human, it's a biological need. He'll be married, he'll have another children. So the story will never end, you know, so there should be some cutting point. By the way, just a week ago, the Ministry of Interior, now the Ministry of, how do you say, Aliyah, yeah? She's an Ethiopian, Penina Tamenoshete, yeah? And also the Ministry of Interior, they agreed to bring, no, I don't know how many remains there, 8,000, but they want to bring 5,000 because of the situation in Ethiopia. Also, on the one hand, it's not related to the situation in Ethiopia, you know, where the Ethiopian Jews are, there is no war, to tell you the truth, you know, where there are Feleshmura, there is no war, you know, there is no problem. It's on the other side. But people want, you know, to, how do you say, to take advantage of this thing and to bring the remaining people. And before that, I want to relay something. Just a week ago, there was also news on Israeli news. They brought around 71 Jews from Tigray region, 71, yeah. In a special operation, Mossad, they paid $5 million, something like that. They risked their lives. But it turned out after they brought the people, only 4 people are really Jews. And now the Ethiopian government is accusing the Israeli government that among the people that they brought, there are 4 people who are being who are wanted in Ethiopia for genocide, for killing soldiers. Yeah. So I won't say most of this part is becoming really political. And so the families of the Feleshmur who remained in Ethiopia had a very big protest just on last Sunday, around 4,000 of them in front of the Knesset. They said, you bring people who are not even related to Judaism, you bring 60 people, and also probably war criminals. But while our families are, suffering for 20 years? Yeah, why don't bring these remaining people and close the story? So really, from a human, for humanistic reasons, I think also the Israeli government should do something and also try to end this story, you know, a never-ending story. Yeah. So this is my view. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Yaffa, anything you might want to share on this?
I agree with what Anbessa is saying. I think that it's a politically complicated situation right now. There's a lot of pressure on the Israeli government to do something, and they're being taken kind of, well, there's a conflict in Ethiopia, therefore you should act on these remaining 5,000. But there's always, you know, again, where is the end? And it's based in humanitarian and family reunification basis, not really religious or identity basis. And I think that what this really shows is that identity of Judaism and who we are as people and who is a Jew and what is a Jew. And it's always been a question, and you show it in Levi's from the beginning. Who is a Jew? Are they Jews? What's going on? And it's something that we grapple with as a community for a long time, and it never ends, and we have to deal with it sometimes case by case basis. But I think the Ethiopian story is really a pinnacle of that. You know, it encompasses all of those sentiments of who we are as Jews. What does a Jew look like? How religious do you have to be? Jewish identity is complicated. And I think that you just see that playing out again and again in this story of the Ethiopian Jews and the Falash Mora.
Thank you, Yaffa. A number of members from the audience are asking our panelists to relate, if they can, if they want to, the film and the lessons learned, the depictions offered, to another film that deals with the same or similar issue. And that's, of course, the famous film that's almost 2 decades old, Va Vie Devient, Live and Become, which a number of comments point out did very well in Canada at the Toronto International Film Festival. If you are aware of the film, if you have seen it, Yaffa, Anbessa, Levi, what are your takes? What were your memories, recollections of that film, especially in context of what Levi is telling us in Jerusalem?
Well, I have seen the film. I do remember, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I remember it was very emotional watching it for me. If I remember correctly, the story is actually of a boy who's not Jewish, but is kind of smuggled out. His mother is in the refugee camps in Gedaref, and she pushes him onto the plane and kind of tells him that he should pretend to be Jewish to get out of the refugee camp. And then he goes through this whole hiding his identity in Israel as that he's not a Jew, and having to deal with being considered an Ethiopian Jew and dealing with all these identity issues and secrets. And it's a very emotional movie. It's very powerful. I think that, again, it brings us back to, is this just about saving Jews? Is this a humanitarian issue, a genuine humanitarian issue that the state of Israel kind of has to grapple with, which I think that many feel it is. It's a very powerful movie, and I like the fact that he's not Jewish, that he's not an Ethiopian Jew. So it even shows you the experience of somebody who's not Jewish in Israel and how they feel vis-a-vis the community. So it's a great film, and I recommend anybody watch it.
Thank you, Yaffa. Anbessa, Levi, if...
I didn't like the film that much, so I let it that way. I thought it's kind of melodramatic, and I didn't like it. Okay, it's okay. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's perfectly fine. Thank you for that very honest reaction. That's great. And what you offer is a different genre. It's a different take altogether. Yeah. Anbessa, since the question was put to the panelists, if you want to say anything, or if you know the film.
No, I don't know if I watched. I'm not a good at watching films. I don't know if I have watched this film at all. I don't watch many films, so I can't comment.
So our time is running out, but I would like to ask or share one more question. I do apologize to those friends whose questions and comments I didn't get to. I did ask our panelists to give us about an hour of their afternoon, evening, and I want to make sure that they come back next time. So I need to be aware of their tolerance and respect their patience. There's a very important question that has just come in, asking you to tell us a little bit about the success stories that need to be celebrated, about important achievements by individual Ethiopian Jews in Israel, but perhaps also beyond. People like yourselves, Yaffa and Anbessa, are there, you mentioned, of course, a very important current politician, the Minister of Immigration. Are there other famous Ethiopian Jews who are held up, who can be held up as important role models for the next generation? Levi, Anbessa, Yaffa, the screen is open.
I'll say about it just a few words. It's a very small community in Israel. It's about 130 people from Ethiopian Jews. And now, at the moment, serving in the political life of Israel, in the Knesset, there is one minister, Prina Tamena Shata. You saw her in the film.
Yeah.
And another one, he's a member in the Knesset, is Gadi Avarkan. So they are very in everywhere in Israel. And I must say, I'm at the moment producing a film, making by two talented, I don't know if I call it's correct to call them Ethiopian Jews because they're Israelis, but okay, they came from, they was born in Ethiopia, but we have their film is about there's the painful side of being an Ethiopian in Israel. It's dealing about it's a story of three sisters that lost their brothers because of police brutality. There was 13 young Ethiopian people died in the last 20 years because of police brutality. And in this summer, in 2019 summer, there was the last guy, a young Ethiopian guy that was killed by an officer, a policeman officer, and that brought the people out, and they shouted about it, and they felt that their youngsters can't be safe in the Israeli streets. So there is a lot of good things that came out, and there is still racism, and we have to fight against it.
Thank you, Levi.
Okay.
Yaffa, Anbessa, please.
I can give you some examples. As I've said earlier, Ethiopian Jews are being integrated also slowly. As Levi has mentioned, you have a member of Knesset. There are now several. Penina now became the first minister in the history of Ethiopian Jews. There are also, for example, 2 female judges, that were selected first time. There is also a surgeon, and now I think there are around 3 surgeons. There was 1 surgeon, now there are around 3. You have also an academician like me. For football players, you have football players, and others also, those who take a role in a film, in let's say, especially singers. For example, Ethiopians won, for example, the beauty contest, won in how do you say?
Eurovision, the Eurovision song contest.
Eurovision contest. So you have representatives almost in every field, but on the other hand, there are also sad aspects. For example, in the last week alone, 2 soldiers committed suicide. And also 2 married youngsters also committed suicide for various reasons. I think these things should be investigated. Why there are many prisoners among Ethiopian Jews. Also, there are hardly 1.5% of Israel, but the percentage is very great of Ethiopians. And even the Ministry of law, passed kind of guidance, to reduce this number, to release the youngest. They should not be brought to prison for, I would say, petty crimes. This should be really, there should be some kind of restructuring in the system. But as I've said, it takes time. It may take some more time, but I think slowly Ethiopian Jews are becoming part of the mainstream Israeli society. As I've said, for example, if somebody comes from Russia or other country, you can't identify him by his color, But Ethiopians, even if they are 30 years, 50 years, we are how do you say, we are identified automatically.
Visible minority, always.
Yeah. So we can't escape that. And also, people by their very nature, also, you can't rule that out. You still have some racist people. We can't escape that. In every society, you have such kind of people. Yeah. But anyway, we should struggle. Yeah, we should exert pressure. To be equal. And now, and the other interesting thing is Ethiopians now, if they are offended, etc., they will not pass. They will take that guy to a court. And that, for example, when they go to a nightclub, for example, they are not allowed in only because of a color. So in this case, they can go to a court. Yeah. And the guy will be fined 20,000, 30,000 shekels. So slowly people are learning, because if he is fined this amount of money, next time he'll be very careful, not to make this arbitrary selection and leave the Ethiopians outside. So I think slowly this may change, but it will take some time.
Thank you, Anbessa. Thank you. Yaffa, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with Anbessa, and on his points, I think there's especially the last 10 years, a new generation. They're phenomenal. They're producing some amazing arts and culture and influence, and they're reclaiming their own story. I follow lots of amazing people on Instagram. One of them, namely Ashaga, she was just written about in the New York Times. She's a great blogger. They're doing it their way. They're reclaiming their own history and narrative and showing it to the world in their own way. And during the protests in 2016, when I saw that, I was so happy. The truth is, I was so happy because to me, it showed me that their political participation, that they're Israeli, because they're participating politically in a way. They're angry, and I understand that there's problems, but older generations wouldn't have done that in the same way. They were active, and they were yelling, and they were demanding. And to me, I showed it as a sign of them being aggressive Israelis and interacting and being part of the community. And I think it's okay. And at the end of the day, this story shows a lot of negative and positive. It shows a lot of beauty and goodness in the world, and it shows a lot of critical darkness in the world. And that's what we live with. I think that's what the people live with. And you can choose to see what you want, and you can choose to focus on which elements you want, but they're both a part of who we are, and they're both a part of the narrative of this story and this community.
What a beautiful message and sentence to end this discussion on. Thank you, Yaffa. It couldn't have been orchestrated better. So Yaffa and Anbessa, I would like to thank you so much for joining this panel. Yaffa, it was delightful to reconnect with you after almost 2 decades. And Anbessa, it was such a personal privilege and delight to call you my new friend. And Levi, I hope you remain and you will continue to remain our old new friend. Thank you for engaging and teaching us again and again about these important chapters in Israeli social, political, and cultural history. We always look forward to bringing your films to our screens. Hopefully, after Corona, we can do that in person, and we can actually host you here in Montreal in that way.
Yeah, I would love to.
I would also like to say a very special and warm thank you to Sharon Frankel from the Canadian Friends of Tel Aviv University Montreal chapter, and his team, Heather in particular. Sharon and Heather played a very important role in bringing together this panel, making the connections for us with Anbessa and Yaffa in particular. So thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Heather. And a huge thank you goes also to Lisa Komlos, our marketing and social media coordinator at the Azrieli Institute of Israel Studies, who is singularly responsible for bringing all of us together onto the screen and connecting us through social media and through all the wonderful marketing tools and techniques that she has at her disposal. So thank you, Lisa. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in the same place, same time next week when we continue our exploration of the Israeli mosaic. Next week's film will be dedicated to the Israeli-Russian community, and which will be followed by a similar panel discussion with the filmmakers on the same screen at the same time for Montreal and Israel, Monday, 7 o'clock or 12 o'clock. looking forward to welcoming you back under the auspices of the Azrieli Institute of Israel Studies. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
תודה רבה.
תודה לכם.